everyone, welcome to a new video, welcome to my channel. My name is Maaike, welcome to Floating in Dreams. This is my hobby YouTube channel, and on here I like to chat about makeup as well as a bit of fashion. And today I have a makeup related video for you because as I have been doing every month for the entire year, I'm going to be showcasing all of the palettes I have from one single brand. And today, as you can see, we're talking Natascha Denona, and I wanted to do this video this month because these are all of the palettes I have, so it's not the biggest collection on the planet when it comes to Natascha Denona, but I just got in the new retro palette, and some people were saying how much they would like to see swatches of this palette on my super fair skin. So that's one of the things we're going to be doing in today's video, and I thought I could rope in the other things I have as well. So without further ado, let's get to these palettes. One of the reasons why I don't have that many Natascha Denona eyeshadow palettes is, to be quite fair, for two reasons. A, it's expensive, and two, I cannot buy Natascha Denona that easily. I can only order this brand online. This brand is not for sale in a store near me, so unless you have access to a Sephora, then it's much easier for me to find. However, where I live in the Netherlands, this brand is just not readily for sale, and at the price point that this goes for, I'm always a little shaky to just go ahead and try it, no matter how great people say a brand is. I mean, I try to still kind of use my brain when I shop for makeup, but over the years, these are the things that I have put my money towards, and not all of it was super successful right from the start, which is why I ended up making certain choices later on. So I'm going to chat to you about my journey with the brand and also show you swatches of every single one of these palettes. And if you would like to stay tuned for that, then please keep on watching. So out of this entire array, the two palettes at the top were the first two that I bought. And as you can see, I have a really nice sort of even split because I've got two of the $129, I think they are. They're 113 euros each, so two of those. I've got two of the midi size and two of the mini size. So I've got a little bit of everything, you could say. And the first one I actually got was the Lila palette. And the reason why I bought this is because I was just really intrigued with the purple packaging. At the time, I didn't have that many purples in my collection just yet, so I was very interested. But as a lot of people were saying, this just isn't that big of a purple palette, as in you get a lot of other shades that are in purples. And that's also why I ended up not loving it in the end. And the one I'm holding up right now is also not the color story that you got when you bought this. I believe this has been discontinued by now, but there's one shade here that is actually from the gold, which is laying over there, which is this gold shade here. And I took one of the shades from this palette, from the Lila, and put it in my gold palette because I felt that that was sort of more up my street, you could say. This very yellow tone gold is just never really my favorite kind of shade. However, I have found, now that I've gone back and forth between this, that I like the formula enough. So that was, I wanted to try the formula. I really like the mattes that are going on over here, and I also like some of these cool tones that this palette has going on over here. This section, I'm not the biggest fan of. I do really like this shade, and I like these three. So there are shades in here that I like, but I remember thinking, for how expensive this was and how much hype Natascha Denona got and gets, I just didn't really see it after having just tried this one palette. So that's why I do want to come on here and indicate that just because something is hyped up, if it's not really perfect for you, then it may just not be your favorite. However, I did give the brand another chance with the gold, and that's when I truly fell in love. But let's stick to the Lila first. So I hope you can still see the palette just fine if I lay it down like this. It's just a little easier for me. One thing that I have discovered now that I've given this palette a lot more chances is that it's actually quite a clever palette. It's just something I didn't see because I was a bit disappointed by the lack of purples and the fact that only about half of the shades really do something for me, I feel. However, from a color story perspective and what I think they were going for when they created this palette. I think it's very clever with the way it's laid out, because you get cool tone neutrals going into purples, going into berries, going into warm tones, going into neutrals. So this palette gives you a full array of pretty much anything you could possibly want, and I think that that's a very clever move on their part. However, I felt that a lot of these kind of shades I already had in some of my limited edition Vice palettes from Urban Decay. I mean, this really reminds me of some of the shades that I have in my Vice 3 and my Vice 4. I feel that I have a lot of similar shades. So to my collection, this just wasn't that unique. I was really expecting this to have a wow factor for how expensive it was, and it just didn't do it for me. And I think that if I show you swatches, I can also show you why this didn't wow me. So this is what you get if you swatch out the entire Lila palette as I've got it laid out right here, so including the gold that was in here. And as you can see, the mattes are great in this. Like these two cooler toned mattes over here, these two mattes over there, they work really, really well. Really stunning. However, some of these purple shimmers, say for this bottom one over here, but these two at the top, they just are very sheer and they need a lot of building up for them to work, so that's why those weren't my favorite. The warm tone shimmers are all really nice. That berry in the middle is stunning. This actually reminds me a bit of that pink that you get in the Pat McGrath Divine Rose too. It's quite similar to that. So I feel that this palette has a lot going for it, but since I'm more of a cool toned person, and I feel that really it's in the cool tones, that department, that this palette is lacking for me. So that's why I wasn't too impressed with this. However, I ended up liking some of these mattes quite a bit. But this has been like sort of on the chopping block, but because it was so expensive, I'm really sort of trying to go out of my way to try and get it to work for me. And I see merit in this palette now that I've gone back to it. I think I went back to it early in the year just to give it another try, you could say. And I did like it. It's never been my favorite palette, and I don't think it ever will. So next up was the gold. And the gold palette did have me fall in love with the Natascha Denona palettes, mainly because it just had a color story that I feel I could work with a lot better than the Lila. And this is also where sort of the quality of the shadows started to either be, I don't know, different, better. I'm not exactly sure how I should categorize it, but I feel that this was just a lot better. However, this was just discontinued, you guys. I'm terribly sorry. If you still want to buy this, you probably need to go for the Alter Ego dupe. They do a lot of dupes for Natascha Denona palettes, so if you find these too expensive, there are brands that do similar things at cheaper price points. I personally just haven't tried those because if I feel a color story is unique enough, I'd rather invest in the real thing. That's just who I am. But yeah, the gold palette looks like this. Now the shade I changed out was the one in the middle. That's the yellow tone gold that I have going on in my Lila. This is Dragon Bite from the Lila, and it's my favorite shade from the Lila palette, which is why it got to go in here. And I do think that if I were to make this a bit more cool toned, that I would probably take some of the mattes from the Lila and put those in here instead of, for instance, like I feel that these three mattes in here are quite similar. And I think that that's also one of the critiques of some Natascha Denona palettes, is that you get a lot of variations on similar shades. It's quite monochromatic. However, in this palette, I felt it worked really well for me. I was able to create some stunning looks. I actually appreciated that all of these shades, even though they are very close, they do have different undertones, making it a little bit more versatile. And this is when I really started to see why Natascha Denona gets so much hype. Was it still very expensive? Was it worth the money? For how much I use it, I feel there are definitely some shades in here that I don't have anywhere else. So I do appreciate that. But I do now see again why I, for instance, would change this out, because I already have this one over here, and perhaps put in one of the taupey shades from the Lila and make it even more perfect for me, because I do prefer, again, something that is a bit more cool toned. However, this was very neutral for me, so it's not too warm, it's not too, you know, too against my skin tone, you could say. It did have that very yellow tone gold, and I just don't like those. So the shade that the packaging and the palette is kind of named after, that's the one that I decided to forego. So I've again laid it down so we can do some swatches. Now your eye is probably drawn to these greeny teals that are going on over in this corner, but I would like to suggest to also sort of forget about those shades for a minute, because you just get some lovely neutrals. My favorite shade in the entire palette, as you will see when we get to it, is this shade over here, which is Kava. It's a really nicely textured shadow that can really amp up anything that you've got going on. The same goes for this white shade in the middle. I feel that that's perfect for a more like textured look as well. And that's one of the things that I really liked about the gold palette, is that you can do some really interesting neutral looks with this without going overboard, because you have the option to pull in something more colorful, but you don't have to, and you can just stick to the neutrals, but add some lovely textures that really make for some standout looks. So that's why I ended up liking this so much. So let's do some swatches. Again, I'll go vertically like that, because I feel that that's the way the colors go together. And there you have the entire gold palette swatched out. Now this is the shade that doesn't belong, because that would be Dragon Bite from the Lila palette. And actually, now that I'm swatching these out again, I haven't swatched out this palette in a while, but I'm actually now figuring out that this shade has a bit of a pink undertone. So that's probably why I like putting Dragon Bite in here so much. So yeah, as you can see, this is not the most like boom in your face pigmentation kind of palette, but in case you know anything about me, then you might know that I love a buildable formula, and that's definitely what you get here. These three over here are more like toppery shades. Then you get some lovely mattes with a little bit of mustard brown, and then you just get this like, well, mustard leaning brown as well. You get these shimmers in the middle, and then I have these three mattes here, which are lovely for setting up any sort of look. And then you have another three really lovely shades, and then over here, of course, I'm putting it in the worst spot possible, but over here we have Kava. Let me give it another swatch right here, because then I can show you a bit better. But do you just see how nicely that catches the light? And if you just put this over any of the other shimmers, I feel it really adds something differently to any look that you do. So I do really like Kava. So I'm going to be saving the best for last, and we're going to end the video with my two favorites, which would be the mid-sized palettes. So I'm going to move on to the minis, and the first mini I bought is the mini Love. I didn't get the bigger sized Love palette, mainly because the color story just didn't really appeal to me. I mean, I'm not a pink kind of person, but then I spotted this and I felt that this was a little bit better for me. You get a really nice rosy plum, a deeper plum, something champagne, and then some really lovely shimmers to round out the palette. So let me show you this one. So there we would have the mini Love, and as you can see, these are just the kind of shades that do really work on me. I love how reflective this bronzy shade is. It's got a really nice duochrome on it, in it with that pink shift, which you don't really see in the pan. It looks like a standard bronze, but then when you put it all over the lid, this is kind of what it looks like. This is a perfect crease shade for me. This is great for deepening things up. This can go all over the lid or on the lower lash line, and then I just have something for the inner corner. So this is a great 5-pan, one look in a palette. And then one of my more recent purchases would be the mini Retro. And I bought this when I was in Paris over the summertime, because that's pretty much the only country in Europe that I can get to that really sells this brand, so that's a bit difficult for me to buy it from. I thought this looked peachier in the pictures online than it does when I look at it in real life, and this actually pulls quite cool toned, because these two greens are quite cool toned as well. So I feel this is more pink cool toned peachy leaning rather than like a warmer peach, if that makes sense. I felt it looked really stunning on my fair skin tone. It's definitely a color story that I really like, and how they took this and turned it into this is beyond me, because I would have loved to see some darker greens in this palette actually, but I love a good mauve tone color story, so that's why I ended up buying the large size as well. And this is what the mini retro looks like. Just look at that. I love it. The green in the middle is a perfect green shade. That peachy matte is great for blending things out. I love that sagey green shimmer. It's just lovely. And then the other two shades are lovely again as inner corner highlights or on the lower lash line, or just some fun accent colors. You don't have to go in with the greens if you don't want to. I can see myself doing like 3 or 4 different looks with just this one little 5-pan color story. It's super versatile. More so I feel than the mini love. This I can sort of see myself doing like one look with. This in the crease, this to deepen it up, inner corner, lid, or inner and lower lash line, and I'm done. Whereas with this, I'm like, you could go all green, you can go very neutral, you can make it a little bit more vampy, or you can use all the 5 shades, or just go in with this shimmer as well. I think this is a really nice one and done shadow if you were to just buff it into the crease as well. So lots more options with the mini retro, I feel. Now, if there was a palette that really drove my love for Natascha Denona home, it would be the Glam, which was launched last year. I actually had the Diva on my wish list because that was the one I was gonna try, but then they did this and I was like, right, this is all I need, because the Diva is mainly matte and doesn't have that many shimmers, and I prefer a shimmer over a matte. So then you're at the right address when you try and pick up the Glam palette, because it only has 5 mattes and 10 shimmers, which for me is perfect. However, I can see why people don't like this. It doesn't go overly deep, so I think it's lovely if you have a fair complexion, because this shade in the middle is like a really good dark chocolatey brown. There's no black in here. It's quite cool toned, but let me just cover this section up. And I'll be doing the same thing in the retro because I feel the same way there. Do you just see that it's quite cool toned, but then this is what gives you some warmth. So this is still great even if you do have a warmer undertone, because you can pull in some warmth to not make it look too deadly on you if that's not what you like. However, for my fair skin, it's just this in the crease, that to blend things out, that is liner, this to deepen things up, or this in the crease. Like these two can go into the crease quite perfectly, and those two. And I don't mind putting a shimmer like this or this in the crease as well, or in the outer V I should say, or this bronzy brown as well. So I was able to pull some stunning looks out of it. And I did actually do a video where I made a look with this and the Urban Decay Naked 2, which was discontinued and is one of my all-time favorite eyeshadow palettes. And I can do the exact same look with this palette. So if you ever missed out on it and you're looking for a good cool tone color story that has lots of taupes, I would go for this one. This is great. Let me show you the swatches. And there you have the Glam palette. And as you can see, I'm not sure if this shows up really well on camera, but those two warmer toned mattes don't pull that warm toned on me. They are quite neutral actually, I find. So really only that gold is like super duper warm toned. Everything else pulls more neutral or cool toned. And as you can see, it barely shows up on my skin because it is so light. This is just a fair toned, cool undertone person's best friend. Like that's the only way I can describe it. This is one of my favorite palettes in my collection, and for good reason. And finally, we have the new retro palette. So I just got this in a couple of weeks ago. I haven't put this on my face yet, so that's perhaps good to know. I haven't put a brush in these yet to try and see how they apply. I've only swatched it by now. And this is what the color story looks like, and I think you can see why I like it. It's got some of the things that I love so much about the Love, but then a little bit more perfect for me. Now, some people have been warning me, saying that they feel this pulled quite peach on them, and I can see why, because this corner over here is a bit more warm toned leaning and a bit more like peachy pink. So again, if I were to cover that up, I feel that that's quite cool toned slash mauve-y, whereas this makes it a bit more peachy. So I do think that this is the kind of palette where you need to be quite careful what shades you put together if you're going for a certain look. I would definitely sort of, if I want to make sure that it looks a bit more plummy, mauve-y, then I would have to stick to this side of the palette and not pull in anything from that side, I think. There are two like very shimmery, toppery kind of shades that really remind me of some of the textures you get in the gold, which I appreciate because in the Glam, one critique I would have there is that all of the shimmers have the same level of vibrancy to them. So there are no textures or really different things, and I think this palette has a little bit more going on in terms of texture, which is what I really liked about the gold, which is another reason why I might like this. However, I just swatched this palette for the first time as I was getting ready to film this video, and there are some of her creamy mattes in here, and I'm not entirely sure yet how I feel about those. I believe there's 4 of them in here. I think this one, and those didn't swatch the best. So I am a bit nervous. However, this shade, stunning. This shade, stunning. This shade, stunning. Again, I'm going for all shimmers here. So I think I have enough here to really make it work for me. It's just that time will tell because this is currently still on my to try pile. I will be updating you on this palette and how I feel about it once I've done looks with every single shade that's in here. That's what I like to do when I review eyeshadow palettes. Show you all the looks using every single shade, and before that time I will never ever give my final thoughts on a palette. So for now, it has me intrigued, but I'm not 100% sure I love it as much as the Glam. However, I think it has the potential to be a great one because it does have some of the lovely textures that the gold has as well. So let me swatch this for you. Now that would be what the retro looks like on me, and against my fair skin I feel that the undertones look really nice and mauve-y, especially that top row. I think I'm going to get a lot of wear out of that. Loads of fun shades. These two are deep, but they're not that deep that I feel I can't work with them. This plum shimmer that I pointed out in the bottom left corner is stunning, so you can do like a plummy smoky eye with this. Now these two shades, which are this guy and this guy right here, those are the two that I feel very dry for me. So those are a bit, these two make me a bit nervous. Like I have to go into them several times, and as you can see, like they barely swatch. So I'm really curious to see how those will perform. Those I believe are both one of those creamy mattes. However, this one and this one is too, so I don't really see why they would look so differently. This I think is perhaps a little warm toned for me, and also this and this, but maybe, you know, you can still do a warm toned look, and that's something that I, for instance, really like about my Lunar Beauty Eternal Eclipse palette. So I'm just gonna have to see how it goes. I mean, it's got a lovely like rosy, bronzy kind of shade. This taupe shimmer I just love. Those two toppery shades are stunning. So I think there is enough here to really make me happy. I really like the undertones, and I think there's a good variety of shades here as well. So nothing that I've seen so far based on just swatches makes me go like, ooh, I'd never want to use that again. I think I can have a lot of fun with this. However, it's perhaps deeper and more warm-toned pinky peach than I would have expected it to be from pictures. So that may be good to know. I think if this were better, then I think it would have had a nice taupey matte to tie everything together. So it really is going to depend on how this shade performs with a brush, how much I'm actually going to like it, because this I feel is a bit light. So how am I going to bridge the gap between some of these like shimmers and then some of these darker mattes? That's sort of still the question I have for myself now that I've just swatched it. So thank you very much for watching today's video. This was my Natascha Denona brand overview. As you can see, I don't have the largest collection of Natascha Denona palettes for several reasons, and because not all of the palettes I bought from them were 100% successful. I do try to pick and choose from the brand what I do put my money towards. I don't just blindly buy a Natascha Denona palette. I definitely don't. However, I think I prefer this midi size over the larger sizes or the smaller sizes. This is definitely sort of like my sweet spot, and I also think that in terms of price point and the amount of product you get and the shade selection that you get, that the midi-sized palettes are probably where it's at for me. Like, this is what I think is a good price point for this kind of formula with this kind of shade selection, etc., etc. They of course also do some warm tone palettes. I don't really have any of those, as you can see, but yeah, I have heard great things about the bronze, and was it the sunrise or the sunset? One of the bigger ones was either sunrise or sunset, and then one of the midi ones. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, this is everything that I've got going on, so I hope this video was helpful, that it gives you a bit of information on my thoughts about the brand and what they do in terms of eyeshadow. And then I hope you really enjoyed this video today. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more by me. I make 3 new videos a week, so I can't wait to see you in my next video. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.